Hello and welcome to The Director's Voice, a video podcast brought to you by FERA, the Federation of European Screen Directors. We are thrilled to present this series of dialogues between filmmakers discussing their craft and their role in today's European audiovisual industry. In today's episode, directors Bill Anderson and Christina Rosendahl interview Alexander Nanau about his acclaimed film Collective and about taking a political and social stance as a filmmaker. Listen in on a fascinating conversation about filmmaking in Europe with three passionate directors.
Welcome everybody. Our dialogue today is part of the series The Director's Voice that FERA has developed to explore the question, what is the purpose of a director in Europe and the world today beyond the responsibility to entertain? And we'd like to ask this question not only from the point of view of directors with a unique voice and perspective in the current audiovisual landscape, but also in relation to the rapidly changing audiovisual ecosystem in Europe and the world. The series is released on video on the FERA website, and it will be on YouTube and it will be available as a podcast. We are honoured to have with us today Alexander Nanau, the director and cinematographer of the multi-award-winning, hugely successful film Collective. My name is Bill Anderson. I'm a director of fiction, film and TV here in the UK, and I'm joined today by Christina Rosendahl from Denmark.
Yeah, let me tell you where I come from. I'm also a film director of feature films and documentary in Denmark, and I'm also heading the Danish Film Directors Association, doing political work for directors in general and here in the country. Also very honored to have you, Alexander Nanau, as our guest today, and very exciting to hear your to pick your brain. So let's get into it.
Yeah. So, Alexander, one of the things that struck me as I looked down the huge, long list of international awards, which clearly recognised the profound humanity of the film that you made that has touched so many people across the world. I was struck by two institutions, the Toronto Film Festival and the Oscars. And the reason why was because both these institutions nominated the film not only for Best Documentary, but for Best International Film. And it seems an example that they recognise that the director's voice can transcend what's arguably the biggest genre divide in our world, which is that between documentary and fiction. And one of the big differences between documentary and fiction films is very obvious at the end of a film, where in feature films, the credit list goes on for ages because there are so many people involved. And in documentary, there are very few. Your credits are sort of absolutely tiny. But I noticed at the end of Collective, you actually singled out a specific credit amongst the 3 or 4 credits that you gave yourself and your team for dramaturgy. And I'd like to start by asking you, as because this film was nominated for Best Film as well as Best Documentary, what does dramaturgy mean to you, and what was your experience of it on this particular film?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm really pleased to talk to you, and I was looking forward to this. Dramaturgy. I think, documentaries are basically, for me, and that's maybe also why I do my own camera work in my films. It's reality, but it's the way you look at reality. It's the details you depict from reality. And for me, it's always very important in my films to work on dramaturgy in order to find the best representation in film form of what I've been going through while making the film and passing that on to the viewer. So I want the viewer basically to have an experience that resembles, for sure, in 1.5 hours, and in a compressed form, for sure, but that resembles basically not only my emotional experience, but also an experience of growing, of learning from other people's lives, and of self-discovery in a way for the viewer. And for that, you need dramaturgy. You need to understand how you tell a story in order to give the viewer this experience. In order to, we are still, even if you're a documentary filmmaker, you're still a storyteller, and you're still, a Svengali that needs to work with the tools of basically with the same tools as a fiction film, because for me in the cinema, there's no difference between fiction films and documentaries. My experience as a viewer has to be, a full life experience. It's something that I think about maybe when I leave the theater. That was, there was fiction and that was documentary. But I think that during the experience, it has to be so authentic that I don't think about if it is fiction or documentary. It's just my own intense experience as a viewer with a story in a dark room.
And I think, Alexander, it would be nice for us if you could also, for the people who maybe hasn't seen your film yet, we're talking about the film Collective, which opened last year, 2020, during the pandemic, the year of the pandemic. Would you just tell us in short what the story of the film is?
Yeah, it's it's always hard to say what it is about because it's so multi-layered. So it's a story that starts from a fire that took place in a popular club in Bucharest, a music club. And in its aftermath, many people died in hospitals. And the film basically is shadowing the work of journalists that uncover the lies of authorities and doctors, that they can treat these burn patients when in fact they couldn't, and they prohibited their transfer into proper burn clinics in other European countries and killed them basically. And the film depicts the work of investigative journalists that really fight with authorities, with politicians, that try to dismiss their investigation as fake news. But in the end, they find out that Romanian hospitals are full of hospital bacteria that also killed these burn patients, and that the state had known it for years through their secret service. And in the second part of the film, we're following basically the same story about the healthcare system, shadowing the work of a newly named Minister of Health. So it's a story told from from within two trenches of society, in journalism and really from inside the heart of power, so to say.
And could you tell us a little bit about that perspective, like that sort of that two perspectives in the film, also regarding Bill's questions about the dramaturgy? How did you make that choice?
I mean, I made the choice being aware that I didn't see until then any film where the main character is switching in the middle of the film, and I was not sure it will work. But I had, my instinct told me that we need this other perspective from inside the system after we had a very strong part of the film about this press investigation, and really from inside the newsroom, which you rarely see, and really from inside first-time meetings between whistleblowers and journalists at night, and all the things that we normally don't see, or we only see them in fiction films. And although I was aware it might become a problem to be able to switch main character in the middle of the film and follow then the minister, I felt that if I can feel the need for it in real life, and if I can feel a natural drive towards this other storyline, there must be a way also to find the right dramaturgy in order to keep the audience interested.
It struck me that I've heard people talking about this change of baton between the two central characters in the movie, but it struck me that the director's voice, your voice, was very, very loud and clear, because rather than getting the standard corrupt health minister giving you the usual, lies, you found, by extraordinary good fortune, you had a new young health minister who, like the journalist, was absolutely driven to speak truth to power and change things. And I mean, I was just struck by the extraordinary thing that one of the first things Vlad says when he takes office is the first thing to do in order to regain trust is stop lying, which is one of the most profound political statements ever. But if you'd written that in a fiction film as a script, it would have been discarded as banal, ridiculous, stupid. No one would ever say that. But you had a minister who did say it. And the fact that it was documentary and truth gave, I don't know, I felt that the thing about the two forces uniting, or the two heroes, was that you were able to elevate the story to an almost mythic level. I mean, was that something that resonated with you as part of the dramaturgy when you were putting this together?
No, I mean, the thing is, it's an observation documentary, so I didn't know what will come. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I knew that this new minister is from outside politics, and the fact that he was transparent and gave me access, for sure, already showed a different kind of intention than, people in such a corrupt system like the Romanian political and healthcare system, where having access is basically impossible because everything is a lie. There's nothing is true. But I still didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know if he would not, maybe pretend, fail, be weaker than the system around him that can, wrap people into their spider webs very fast. So it was something that we discovered while filming. And for me, for example, while making the film, I must say I'm not so, I don't do documentaries, and even this one, I didn't do this documentary because I think that we have to tell the story to bring to change to society or to portray society. For me, all the films I make are really more like exploring human nature and exploring characters. And I was, in particular, with this young minister, I was really interested in how would I cope with this power. If someone would name me a minister of health or a minister with so much responsibility from tomorrow on, how does a normal human being deal with power, and how do you withstand such a corrupt and such a filthy, basically, healthcare and political system? So it's the question of the individual more than trying to tell a story that brings highlights something in society. So regarding my drive, that's the drive with which I explore the characters I film. I never think that we have now to tell a story that will bring this this change. And I think that documentaries many times have this problem that they try to be journalistic or activists, or because even though we made a film about journalism, I don't think that I'm a journalist, and I don't think that my mission is to first of all to bring forward the factual truths. That's the job of a journalist. My job as a filmmaker is to explore human nature.
Can I just ask a little bit about that? I think it's interesting the idea that you as a director, you go into the story personally investigating human nature, like how this power story, how would that affect me if I was in that position? But then again, when you see the film, the sense you get as an audience is that this is very much a film about institutional injustice, about institutional harassment, and not like harassment from one person to the other. Of course, that's part of it, but it's on a much larger scale. It's institutional harassment. So at what point in the process did you sort of commit yourselves to the institutional perspective? Was that something that came on the way shooting, or was it in the editing, or did you have that notion from the very from the set, the beginning of the film?
No, I think the institutional injustice, let's say, are the life circumstances of this person during the time we filmed him. So it's basically it's the context in which this person existed, and then for sure you start to dig as a storyteller and to understand, how do institutions work towards individual and vice versa, and what is what is a system? We always talk about the system. What is a system? It's really something that its components are still human beings that take decisions, and the system is nothing else than let's say the sum of the life attitudes of singular people. So there's no such thing as the system. It's always people behind it, and we see it also now. Because what we managed to show this really rotten system in Romania that consists of rotten people that only lie and steal and are corrupt. We see today during the pandemic, acting out on a completely different scale. Romania is right now the country with the most COVID deaths, and the numbers are still falsificated, although they say it's over 500 people per day that die. There are much more. Politicians just start political crisis in order to destroy the institutions and to steal now, because a lot of European funds will come into the country, and to steal all the funds. So basically they tear apart society only to be able to steal, and they don't care about the fact that there's a pandemic and that their actions are basically killing thousands of people per week. So for sure, by showing and by following as a storyteller the way an individual copes and fights and tries to stay true to his own values within the context of an institution, for sure, in the end, it becomes a portrait of a society. Yeah.
Alexander, you talk about basically empathy. You talk about filming the health minister, imagining what you would do with the power, and clearly the kind of empathy that you feel towards him comes across in what you shoot and the story that you tell, and that's why I assume it's touched so many people worldwide, because we understand human beings. But I just wondered whether that empathy that is your ethos also helps you generate trust with the people you're filming, and whether that actually it feeds the access that you get to people, allowing you to film them at their most personal, at their most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's really a thing about, the way you build relationships in a very short time with people, the way you find points of connection with people, because everyone is different. You have maybe in this film you can see it very, very clearly that there are so different people. You have a journalist, you have whistleblowers, you have fire victims, you have parents that whose children were killed by these people, and you have the minister. And being able to shoot observationally, and whistleblowers, we met them 5 minutes before we started shooting. We had 5 minutes to get them, to convince them. So that means also that you have to find with every very fast and to feel the people and find the very fast way of winning their trust. And there are always different things, with the journalists that are always, because they're journalists, right? They're always skeptic. In the beginning, they even thought that I'm maybe, working for the Secret Service, and that's their new way of infiltrating their newsroom. With the minister, I think it was very important also that he had a very young team of professionals around him. And we felt maybe that we belong to the same world at once, a modern world where values are respected, and we know what the rights of people are. And with the whistleblowers, it's hard to say what it was. I mean, many times it's just this instant connection you have to people, and they trust you. And other times it's also, the interest that people have in giving you access. And then there's the first decision is one based on interests, and then you build from there. But what I always try to do is I try to keep a very clear distance, that they never have the feeling that that you're serving something, or that they know why you do your film or how you do your film. So I would not, basically many times I would not talk to them. When I would stop recording, I would not talk to them. I would just go into a corner and do my stuff, so that people get, let's say, that the tension gets a bit higher between us. And it's not something about becoming so friendly with the people that they accept that you film them, because then you don't get anything. You just get there's no tension on the things you film. It's just friendly people that accepted that you all will be nice to each other and film nice things. And that's you can see it many times in films that they don't have tension because the relationship is too close between the director and the subject. So yeah, coming back to your question, it's so different from person to person, but it's maybe something that you develop, from film to film. You develop a better human instinct about how you connect. But for me, in the end, it's always about the projection I have on people and how I see how it will be on a canvas. So I always check, if there is authenticity. So authenticity that lands on the canvas is the most important, and that's how I can also see how if my relationship to them is the right one for the film. I never go for a relationship that is right for us as maybe people that will become friendly with each other. It's always about did I do the right choices so that what these people have to give and what lands basically on the canvas is authentic.
Can I just dig into that a little? I'm just getting curious, because I think there's a lot of filmmakers that believe that you have to create a big kind of existential relationship to characters that you will follow, and that applies for kind of cinematic documentary filmmakers, whereas journalists, we may believe that the way they work is much more quick and result oriented, and not creating a relationship in order to get the information that they need. But it seems to me, when you talk about your work, that you are actually kind of not manipulating, but you're going after some sense of distance to the subjects in order for drama to occur. Is that right? And also the next question. So what do you give them in exchange of a longer relationship? Is it clear rules of the game, or is it your own your own clear driving force for the project? What is it that you give them that exchanges back their trust?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the distance is maybe well described if we think about it as the distance you have to keep in order to leave space for the viewer to come into this relationship, because in the end you want the viewer to feel that he or she has their own relationship to the character. So if your relationship is too close and you can feel it in the footage and you can feel it on the canvas and you can feel that there's a filmmaker that has this strong relationship, then there's no space for the viewer. So you don't give him any chance to be basically the one experiencing this relationship to the character on the canvas as his or her relationship to the, you know. So that means they can't really identify, because there's this storyteller that is always, you know, is always there. And that's also what I do also with the camera work. I always try to find the best way to film things so that you don't have the feeling that there's someone chasing life, that there's someone basically manipulating a camera or running after life. So that's a very important thing for me to when I think about this distance, it's always the distance that is needed for the viewer to have space to get into the, you know, in between me and and then what I give them in the long run, it depends also again, you know, from character to character. Sometimes it's that people just want their story to be told and they trust you to be the one to see it and to see it objectively. Other times it's a total risk, you know, people, because you are very powerful basically, most of all in the editing room. And that's a good question, you know, why do people take this risk to give you all this power over their image, you know? Sometimes they don't know, they can't really understand what the result will be, which is always the best situation to be in, because then they just abandon the need to try to be in control. And yeah, so no, it's very hard. You know, if you would ask the characters why they did it, I don't know if they could give you the real answer. You know, what was it in that moment that they, in the end, decided, or was it an instinct? Was it trust? Was it maybe the hope that their story will be out there? I don't know. It's you know, it's maybe a mix of all these things, and it can change every day basically during filming. Because the thing is also, when you follow people for such a long time, they don't expect it, and you try to cheat a bit in the beginning. You know, you try to say like maybe, you know, some weeks, because they always think about days. You know, because they see you with a camera with a very small team, they think of you as of broad TV broadcasting, right? You come, you do your little reportage, and then you'll go broadcast it. And then you say, like, no, we'll stay for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 2 months, 3 months. Then, you know, you start talking about a year of following their lives. And they still can't imagine what it will be. And they always think that that it's too much, that you cannot make a film out of so many things that you have seen in their lives, because the film will be 1.5 hours. But it's, you know, from my experience, it's good when they, you know, when all their expectations are basically, when they lose their trust in everything that they thought it will be, because then they let go of control. And even the journalists, you know, at a certain point, they said like, well, when will you release this film? I mean, the time when you will release this film, nobody will care. These things happen now. And, you know, and I would say like, you know, we're going to shoot for another half of a year, then we're going to edit for 1.5 years. And until we get a good release plan of the film, it might be another 2-3 years from now. And they go like, okay, good. I mean, that, you know, nobody will care. And then I told them, you know, I think that, you know, it's a film, so I think it has to be valid even in 10 years from now. I'm looking for something that is universal, that will stay. And I think that that's basically my responsibility, to make a film that will stay also in 10 years from now, and does not just serve current affairs or a current situation.
Alexander, you seem to make it clear that it's the absence of an agenda, either a journalistic agenda or a friendship agenda, which gives observational documentary its kind of greatest strength. But I just want to move the discussion maybe into the marketplace, where the inability to be able to write down briefly and succinctly to financiers what it is you're going to deliver to them for their money in advance has always perennially been a problem of the observational documentary. I wonder whether, in the current world of distribution and streamers and funders, whether that situation is getting worse.
It's hard to say. I mean, the thing is, the world is the financing world and is changing very fast because of the streamers. And so basically, I lived with this film. I was in my cave during the film, and when I came back into reality, the things have changed a lot. I mean, what I always do with my observational films is that I invest with our company and maybe one or two other partners, we invest development money into something that we believe in, and then I go out and start, shooting it, looking for characters, seeing, trying to make the right choices to follow the right people to try to tell a story, and then I would go to the editing room and really try to edit right first of all. But the most important for me is edit a presentation trailer. So an industry trailer that is around, 3, 4, 5 minutes sometimes. And that trailer is not only important for me for the future financiers, so that they can trust me and see that I really have, strong characters, the right visual language and so forth. It's more important for me, because if I manage after filming for 1, 2, or 3 months to compress in 5 minutes the story or the potential of a feature film, then I feel that I can be courageous enough to go out and spend the money of other people. And so it's really, it's this trailer work, and it takes time. Sometimes when I work with people that don't know my work, they think like, well, why would you edit for 1.5, 2 months for a presentation trailer? It's not a film. But it's not the thing. I really need to understand the details of it and to really feel already in this trailer that I'm on the right track. I did the right decisions, and I have the fundamentals in order to really launch a whole production into a feature film. Because in the end, it's it's 3, 4 years. Maybe if it's so successful, you have to spend another 1.5 or 2 years with releasing it. Because now with the pandemic, it took 1 more year to release it, basically because of the pandemic. So it's a lot of time out of your life. So you have to. I feel I need to build this fundament to be sure that I know I want to do it.
It's the DNA of the project.
Yeah, and that said, it's for sure. You go until now. You go to your film funds with it. Although I think this is the first film I did. Yeah, it's the first film I did that was financed by the Romanian Film Fund. All my films that were also very successful, they never found funding worthy. Then for sure, what I also do, I was lucky to be invited with my last 2 films at the ITFA Central Pitch, which always was, I think, the most important point of the project to be launched on the international stage, and also test, the waters with an international audience, because in the Central Pitch at ITFA, if you know it, it's this arena where you have basically the industry there and people from all around the world that are watching the pitch, and then you can really see, like, is it working? Is it universal enough? And so forth. And so that was the financing model. But for sure, now we are living in a world where the streamers have most of the money and need content. And I must admit that it's a problem that 80% of the things they want are crime stories, and it's just horrible. Every second proposal is a crime story. I mean, are there not any other stories to tell? I mean, not even a story. It has to be a series. It's always a crime series, which is fine. I love series. I love to do series, and there are wonderful things on the platforms. But most of the things they want to do have always to do with some murder crime story.
Okay, so I will just rise or draw a balloon down and say that we have planned to discuss the streaming services and how that affect the artistic landscape of the director for a little later in this session. But first of all, I would like to ask you if you could. It's just when you look at the world today and the rise of Trump and the rise of the Me Too movement, and also populism more generally, Bolsonaro in Brazil, and looking at how democracies are challenged at this momentum. Do you think or do you think that your film created a momentum in Romania when it was released, or did your film propel a momentum that was already underway? And either way, how did the film sort of grab the zeitgeist and created the change that has also come out of the film's release?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to measure that, and I don't think that I'm not even sure that a film should try to do that or create a momentum in the. I think that the film has to work individually with every single viewer and work within him in the next years of his life. But it is for sure a story that represents basically in a nutshell the worldwide problem of populism and corruption and the lack of humanity basically that comes with it. And for sure, we have seen it in the pandemic, right? In all these different countries, wherever you had populism and corruption, more people died. The pandemic was handled by incompetent, ruthless people that were just stealing money. Starting with Great Britain, where you had maybe the biggest corruption exposed during the pandemic, and the way the funds were spent, and with a prime minister that is a complete lunatic that provokes so many more deaths. Like it is now in Romania, they are completely out of control. I mean, they don't even try to contain the virus. It's just about creating more and more scandals just to steal more and more money. And as you said, with Bolsonaro, you have the same thing. Even the Senate now wants to investigate him for crimes against humanity. So that said, for sure, we had, what was interesting is that we released it in cinemas. We had 2 weeks in cinemas before they had to close down because of the pandemic. And we had record numbers, like we had 25,000 admissions in 2 weeks, which is huge for Romania that does not really have cinemas. A documentary, maybe the highest number before that was 8,000 people, but spread over a year or longer, and this was in 2 weeks. And the surprise was that most of them were really young, between 16 and 30, 35. So this was really a generation that needed the answer, like, do I stay or do I have to leave this country in order to have a proper life and live in a meritocracy and have the chance to live up to my life's potential, and not being stuck in such a corrupt society. and that was beautiful. And the other thing that we could measure is that the number of whistleblowers with the journalists really exploded once the film came out. So with many journalists, but with the ones you see in the film, basically before the film came out, they had per day up to 10 valid leads from whistleblowers in their different mailboxes and WhatsApp and however whistleblowers try to get in contact with journalists. And once the film was out, that really went up to 70, 80, sometimes 100 per day. And many of the important investigations they've done during the pandemic started from whistleblowers that came and clearly have seen the film or have read about the film
Wow.
and decided to speak up.
That is great. That is interesting. That I mean, I must say, I'm just going to provoke you a little bit now, Alexander, because you of course, I understand that you as a filmmaker, when you make a story with scenes, of course, you want to communicate directly to each member of the audience. But are you saying that your films are not politically, in the sense that you don't care if there is created a change with your film? It's just
No, I'm not saying that, because I mean every story I think that you tell, you hope to reach as many people as possible and to to get something out of it that is provoking them to change something or to change themselves or to think about other people or themselves. So it's automatically you want your story to provoke some kind of change. And with this kind of a story that really touches upon basic problems of the society, or basic the menacing of society, basically. For sure, you want people to see things. You want the anger that you have felt while seeing all the injustice. You want people to understand and feel it. So it would be, not right to say I don't want these things to. For sure, I want to provoke people. That's you tell stories in order to provoke people, right? It's also the way you provoke yourself. But there is, for example, in Romania, where we don't have film journalism, we don't have film criticism. I mean, the few people that write in Romania are really, although they are young, they are, let's say they are not very sharp, right? And they, for example, although society and so many young people from so many universities also wrote to us, understood the film and got it and didn't see it as a film that tries to be partisan with one thing or another, and that is a story that tries to show the working of the systems and the working of manipulation and so forth. The people that try to write reviews of the film, it's a very small group belonging all to the same group. All said that it. They said it's a political film, but without understanding what they mean themselves, because what they meant is that it is a partisan film. Why would you blame in the film someone? Or they said why would the film spend so much time with a minister? Is in the end still a politician and should not give him so much space. Which, if you start to judge stories by how they should be done, or it's very wrong. But coming back to this thing about being political or not, I mean, that's the thing. I think every story that deals with society in any form is a political story. I mean, even thinking about the society you live in and your role in it, and how if you accept it or not, if you want to live in a country, it's already a political thought, right? I think films should be political, and the question for me is always just how good are films or the stories you tell in provoking a thought process in the viewer,
or inspiring the viewer. I think that there's no shortage of social injustice, and there's no shortage of criminal issues which need to be addressed by people. I think what there is a shortage of is people's belief they can do something about it. And for me, Collective is an extraordinary film because it inspires you by showing people who do this, and they come up against extraordinary problems, but they persist.
It's right, and the people also in Romania could feel that society has changed, and as you said, the film came basically already on a process of change, and just hell, was one element in it, and but at the same time, as society is changing, as the trust in journalists is different, as journalists become better and better and more professional, and there are more and more investigative journalists that are independent and great, most of all young people in Romania. The problem is that the politicians, the corrupt ones, also change in the way they understand how to trick people. For example, there was an embargo. They control most of all the main media outlets in Romania by bribing them with COVID funds. That's what they did at the beginning of the pandemic. There was not one single euro flowing into the cultural sector that has to close down, although it was promised all the time. So everything closed down. Like we had no financing for films. Our CNC closed down. Theaters closed down, everything, and there was not one single euro to come and compensate people that are out of work because of the pandemic. But at the same time, they gave millions in COVID funds for the big for the big media outlets. So basically, there was just a hidden bribe for them not to report on the way they handle the pandemic and the corruption that they were about to do during the pandemic. And they also learn. I mean, there was an embargo about this film. It was not talked about. It was the first Romanian film ever nominated for an Oscar. And they, people talked online about it. Some small papers wrote a bit about it. But other than that, there was an embargo. I mean, I talked to TV anchors that came to me and said, like, we had such a big quarrel in our station when you were nominated. They said, like, no, we're not going to talk about it. And that means that, the system knows. And the biggest problem is in politics, I think, that on the European level, these people manipulate their own image. They are seen as Democrats that try to do the right things, try to protect values in democracy, when in fact they're the most, inside the country, they're really the heads of the most corrupt networks. And that's the case most of all in Romania with the president of the country, that is seen in Europe and is basically applauded by European politicians as being this Democrat, being different, when in fact he is basically the most horrible populist that really steps on people's lives as long as he can help his party and his corrupt network to get to the funds and steal them. It's someone who in May said that the pandemic is over. Everything was opened up. People didn't get vaccinated anymore. And now we are where we are. And at the same time, European politicians don't stop praising him for what a great European politician he is.
How do you see your future, Alexander, as a Romanian filmmaker?
The thing is, I don't see myself as a Romanian filmmaker. I see myself as a European filmmaker. I returned to Romania. I didn't grow up in Romania. My artistic upbringing took place in Germany, took place in theater, took place in groups of people that were of the most different ethnicities and backgrounds. But for sure, I mean, my production company is in Romania, and I think it's complicated for all of us working from here to go on because there's no predictability. As I said, there is the Romanian CNC although it is obliged by law to organize 2 financing rounds per year, it happens that for 1 year they don't do anyone, and not a single one. And then they would not even answer to it. We tried to understand, and we tried to address also the government and say that's not possible. I mean, there are thousands of people behind the companies. You're really killing a sector that is bringing so much money back to Romania. And they would just not. They don't care. So the problem is you don't have a normal working country where you can have a dialogue with the government or the people, the authorities, and then find solutions, because they just don't care. They would meet you, listen to you, pretend to understand, and then it's always about, why should we give money to these people if we can just steal it in other ways with our companies? Doesn't make sense for them. And that's a problem. That's really a problem, because there's no predictability. Zero predictability. We don't know when the next financing round of the CNC will be.
Where do you think that puts the director? You have the population, and then you have the people in power, and if the media is and the system is trying to normally you would say that the definition of a democracy would be a place where the media is free, and it's a place where the media, like journalists, can criticize power. And now in your situation in Romania, where the media is sort of going to bed with power structures like the big media, where does that put the film director?
I don't know if if it's comparable with the media. I mean, as I said, it's the big media, and the TV anchors, let's say, are forced to follow a certain line of lying, basically. But they are journalists that criticize the government, and they're young and great investigative journalists that, unfortunately, the prosecutors don't follow it, because the prosecutors maybe also belong to power many times. But I mean, the question is, where does it put a filmmaker? Is the same question: where does it put an actor? Where does it put an independent actor in theaters? The thing is that you have a society that, because it is robbed all the time and raped basically all the time by this political class, the people are not seeing even the need for art. So it's very hard to make your case, because independent actors, when they said during the pandemic, we don't have any income anymore, society online would say, you should stop begging and go work. So that's the main problem. The same problem with the film financing. You have the same reaction. So why would you want money for your films from state funds? People don't understand that there's a whole system of a state earning money back when they finance productions, because all the work that is done and the taxes that are paid. They don't understand that, and the politicians work with that. And even in my case, because I refused a medal for cultural merit from the country's president, what they did is what even a communist system would do. The next day they exposed basically the financing from the film fund of our film, saying that I got it during the pandemic, not saying it was in 2016, and exposing it as if I was the only production to have received state funds. And so basically then, with their outlets, they started to say, see, he is incredible to criticize us, when in fact he was financed by us, and let it look as if it was the only one. So the result was, I got thousands of messages, and online I was like attacked by normal people, that I'm basically the scum of the earth that is taking state money, and has the guts to refuse the president of the country.
Yeah. But I'm just curious in this landscape of stigmatizing of artists, right? That you have experienced, do you think that a filmmaker in your position is better off making activist films that sort of attack the power structures directly, or should filmmakers in your country align with younger? We were talking about the young population that was sort of rising in the street at the time when your film came out. This whole movement of young people and their activism. Should filmmakers in countries like yours cooperate with the younger activists in order to create a space for themselves to work, or what possibilities of making films do you think you could create for yourself in a bad situation like this one?
These are two different things, because I don't know. I'm not sure. I understand what you mean when you say they should align with the people, activists in the streets. What would that be? I mean, how would that look like?
No, I'm just thinking, what your possibilities, how you could create possibilities for yourself in a landscape of stigma towards artists. So how do you create a space for yourself to be able to work? Do you go to Germany and produce films that attack the Romanian power structures, or just tell other stories? Or do you stay in Romania and cooperate with other people who are fighting power structures? How do you see your
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. That's really, we're talking now about films that are basically on the margin between journalism and filmmaking. And I don't. I mean, in Romania, you don't really have that thing. You have the fiction films where people talk about injustice and the corruption and everything, but they are perceived basically as dark stories from Romania, right? But unfortunately, it would be great to have more documentary filmmakers that really expose basically the way society works or doesn't work, and where the place of of the citizen is. Um, but I don't know what. There's not much to do. Basically, you don't have funding in the country, so the question is, would a German funder um, be able to fund 100% a story that is about the Romanian society? No, they wouldn't. Would I have been able to uh, do this film without the Romanian CNC? Yes, I would have been, because I always work with HBO Europe, that is also funding my films, and they would have been, let's say, the co-producer with the money that comes in from Romania, so I could bring in other money from other European countries. But I think there are not many people that have this possibility, and so once you don't have the local funding system, I don't see, to be honest, how you could fund a film about a Romanian story. Impossible.
Alexander, are there currently any strands of double helix coming together to form DNA of new stories, whether in Romania or elsewhere, for you?
What do you mean?
Well, when you were talking about the trailer that you work on, have you started developing ideas that will form into trailers for new projects?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we started developing projects, but one is an animation that doesn't have to do anything with Romania. One is a series that has to do with Romania, but is more interconnected European story that both are very early in development.
And is still for you the ability to connect with other human beings the primary story driver for you?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, the primary story driver for me is always to understand other human beings. It's like, what can you learn from other people? I think that's always the curiosity that propels me into a story, or makes me decide that I want to stick with the story for many years. It's let's say the richness of the personalities of other people, from which I can learn for my own life. So it's just life experience. Filmmaking for me is life experience. I just decide which life experience do I want to have next.
Listen, I would like to go back to something that you said earlier on, that the streaming services are looking for series and crime series, and so I was just wondering, your thoughts on the situation we have right now, where a lot of money is sort of flowing into Europe via the streaming services, and this idea that you launched about the business model that they have, that is like to a large extent driven by fear and crime stories, like violence and fear in on the screen. What do you think are the challenges for the directors inside the industry right now in this landscape?
Oh, well, that's a very wide field of challenges that are there. I mean, the challenges, or what I think is something that, directors and producers have to keep in mind and have to protect a bit is, we're definitely going to go now through a period in which, content and form will be standardized, somehow linked to a company, right? So you will have the same look for a certain streamer. You have their look, you have the way they want things to feel, to look, and it's a bit of it's a thing that will take at least 10 years until there's a saturation and people will start to go out of this. But the challenge is, how can we be able to keep making films that are distinctive and that are authentic and that are not serving basically the needs and look of a corporation. Sorry, I don't know, personal, but stories that are authentic, that are not serving. It's a bit like it's a bit like Instagram. These different streamers all want their own look. It's you open Instagram, you know what the look is, right? The pictures all look the same there. And it's the same with storytelling, that the streamers become basically different Instagram channels that want their viewers to know when they go there what they find. But for sure, what I'm saying now is also maybe a generalization that is not right till the end, because it's also streamers that put money in risky projects, right? You also have streamers that put a lot of money in stories that would not have been told without them. So also there you have a different thing. And now in the last time we've seen that they really also finance a lot of great big authors of the filmmaking world that really make distinctive films and really make different things. But nevertheless, I think that European funding system has to be able to challenge that and also offer filmmakers the possibility to tell their own stories that do not serve many times the numbers, because now it's all about numbers. Will we release it parallel in cinemas, and how many people watched it, and it's all this thing about how many people accessed it. Many times the greatest films were a flop when they came out, and now we discover that they are basically the best films of film history, ever made in film history. And I think that is the thing that we have to protect, and authorities have to protect. But in functioning systems, in countries like Romania, you don't have authorities. They don't even understand why they work in the film field. They were placed there, and if they wouldn't be there, the party would have placed them somewhere else to steal a bit of money. So
the I was just curious about the because I think that the one of the problems with the streaming services is that the storyteller is a company, or like a big like Death Star, or what you call it now, that we have the fight between Amazon, Google, and Apple, right? It's the big three Death Stars that are attacking the globe. And so what you're saying is that in order to protect the filmmaker as author, as the filmmaker's voice, as the person who decides what stories to tell and also has like the final cut of the story, has to be protected by the European and also national public funding systems in order to resist the pressure from those Death Stars, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and to produce films that maybe, I wouldn't call them Death Stars, because it's they have, I mean, it's fine, they have their roles, and they have a market, and they bring in money into the industry, people are working, but I think that it's important to protect independent filmmaking, that maybe the people of streaming services that are very number oriented would at first not see as valuable films. But once they are done and the films are good, they can, the streamers can be part of them, can co-finance them or buy them or so forth. But I think it's important to really keep an independent funding system in Europe. That's why Europe is Europe. That's why we are the cultural center of the world, because we produce things that are avant-garde and different, and for that we have a system that protects that way of working, so the public funding system.
Yeah. And I was just also thinking, because now you have made a film about power and about about the power structures in your country, and you started out by saying that you wanted to ask yourself the question, what would I do with that power? And I believe that you have changed in your power positions from before you made this film and up until now, because of the film's great success. And could you just share your thoughts about how that power that you have gained, I'm also provoking you a little bit, how has that changed you, and what would you like to use that power for in the future?
Yeah, I don't know if I would, the word power is maybe the wrong one.
Is influence a better word than power?
Yeah, I think it's visibility. I think that your voice is better heard. But yeah, I mean, what definitely changes is that people are interested in what you're doing in your work, and the important thing is that they seeing this film, and then they start watching your other films. They understand that you are good in your profession, and more people want to work with you, and there are more possibilities. But there's one thing that does not change, and that is very hard to teach people and to understand this. And I think it's the hardest thing that we face as filmmakers. What is the next story you want to tell? Nobody, you never you can't learn that. How do you choose your next project? Because I'm not necessarily, I don't feel the pressure to do, to have another success or do bigger films. It's just the thing about, so how do I want to spend the next years of my life, right? How do I choose the stories that will define me, basically? Because every film you make defines you, and every film you make is shaping you. So to come back to your question, it is for sure, let's say, a pleasant thing to understand that you have more dialogues. Basically, you exchange with the best people in the industry, right? So that's what it gives you. This success of a film basically gives you access to another layer of filmmakers and producers, and we all know, people that do great things because they're also highly smart and people you want to exchange ideas with, and that's the great thing that happens once people get aware of your work and really get interested in your work. But then I think, the way you deal with how you choose your next thing is the same very private problem you have that you always had from the very beginning.
And how do you choose? What are your thoughts right now where you're in? What are your work momentum now? What are your thoughts about that?
They're not different from the last times I chose projects. You get triggered by something, you have an instinct for something, and then you try to find out what it is, what the center of a story, of a problem, of a project is that you can identify with, where you feel that you want to explore something. It's very hard to put it into words.
Yeah.
Independently of the success that Collective had all over the world, how did completing the film and feeling that you had expressed the story with your voice, how did that affect you personally on the kind of day when you went, right, that's it, finished?
It's hard to say because it's a process. It's not something that happens in one day. It's because you start and see that the film really works with different audiences and that they react in the same strong way. And in a way, it's something that in the editing room, because that's why you think that you have reached the fine cut, because you think the story is working and is expressing what you wanted to express. I don't know. It's strange. It's hard to describe. It's because there's all your very private connection with the film, and all these hundreds of layers and thoughts that have flown into every minute of the film. And then once you put it out, it becomes the viewer's experience, and it's a bit like when a child leaves home. It's you had your time with him or her. Now it's out in the world, and I must say, what I have a problem with, which is not a problem, but it's my thing, that I know what I've done with the film, with all this complex work, and it's very hard for me to have people coming and talk to me about the film and praising things, because I feel like, okay, that's your experience with the film. I had my experience with the film, and it's complicated for me to take praise, let's say. I know what I've done. I know me and my team, we've done a good job on the thing, and it was supposed to give you a strong experience. But don't come praising me for it, because it's just my job and my team's job. That was our job. It's fine.
I really love that you're saying this, that the different, just the clearness in what you're saying about the personal relationship to your story, and then that the relationship other people has to the story, that is two different things that has absolutely nothing to do with each other. Otherwise, I hope that it will succeed in grabbing people's emotions and hearts, but that you keep your relationship to the film as a private thing. I really love that. I will really take that from this session. That's beautiful.
And maybe we could agree that the world is a better place for your film having been made, and we can enjoy it, and you can enjoy it, and we can share all that.
The thing, it's in the end. In the end, it's a job, right? And everyone tries to do his or her job as good as possible, and sometimes it works out, and other times it might not work out. But we just try to give our best and to tell the story in the best way we have found it.
So I have one, Bill. I have one last question for me, and then Bill can sort of wrap the session up. But I just would like to ask you, why do you think it was you who was going to tell the story? Why is it you and not someone else? What is it inside you that made you pick this subject matter? If you want to share it.
Yeah, at first it was just, a need to understand what was going on in Romania, because it was clearly on the brink of change, and it was a change that I was waiting for since I started to come back to Romania. And then, the very private thing was having been an immigrant all my life, I was really interested in how people are that dedicate their work and life to a society, because, I never belonged to any society, or I never felt part of any society, and I don't identify with either the German or Romanian. Whenever someone tells me, you're Romanian or you're German, I feel like, no, I'm myself. I don't identify with nationalities, but then I was really, because of the energy in society, I was really attracted by understanding how people that really fight for their own society and really dedicate basically things to the well-being of the community they live in. That's what attracted me to all these different characters, from the journalists to the whistleblowers to the minister. Just understanding how other people tick, not more than that.
Thank you for that answer.
Alexander, thank you so much for talking to us today, and thank you so much for making Collective. I think from the title of the film, right at the beginning, through to the last lines of the song, we are how we treat each other, nothing more. You have articulated an inspiration for all of us towards a greater understanding of each other and human cooperation in the face of evil.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and we stand up with you out in the world making more films.
Yeah, thank you. It was a real pleasure. Yeah.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening to The Director's Voice. If you'd like to listen to more FERA content, you can go to our website at screendirectors.eu, our YouTube channel, or whatever you listen to your podcasts. This podcast is produced by FERA. As a federation of national professional organizations, we are proud to speak for 20,000 filmmakers across Europe and beyond. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep enjoying the works of European screen directors.